The first thing to do is to go back to the climate of the college in 1963. We had just been through 8 years of peace, progress, and prosperity under General Eisenhower as president. The country was in a very bullish mood. People had a great sense of the future, and everybody was on a path to do something good. And William & Mary was a very happy place at that time. In May 1963, just before our graduation, I had Ann and a group of the Mortar Board, which is a leadership society for women at the college. They wanted a statement to be rendered on William & Mary integrating racially. And we used to say, in fact, at William & Mary, you know, the country had the Kennedys and we had the Harvey girls. Ann was one of 3. She was the middle sister of a lovely family from Northern Virginia. And she came up with these other compatriots of hers about that statement. So Ann and I, in particular, worked together. And that was one of the first great moves that William & Mary made toward this whole long change that went through on the path of diversity and later affirmative action and other things that took place in colleges and in schools. But above all, she stood for something, and I remember that. And to me, that's always a good indication something else is going to happen to a person like that later in life. Her life story divides into 3 parts: her interest in people, her interest in food, and her interest in the land. In fact, when she graduated in the early years, she went over to West Africa as a member of the Peace Corps with her husband. So she had that sense of outreach and service. Then she got interested in food. She then got a culinary degree. She then wound up consulting with public relations and legal firms in the food sector in Washington. And then finally, she started editing and collaborating on some books, including with leading chefs in the DC area like Restaurant Nora. As I hear it, about 20 years ago, she and her family had bought a property over in the Eastern Shore, and she became quite concerned about the practices of farming and how they were hurting the water and the fate of the bay. And she had an epiphany, she says, in which she said, I've got to do something to get people eating better and help save the bay. That was the beginning moment of Fresh Farm Markets. Her style seemed to be that of a visionary intelligence, a natural leader, someone who had a great, generous spirit of goodwill, who obviously led this organization through the whole era of 20, 30 years of changing expectations for women professionally in our workforce, which has to be kept in mind. And she was later named as one of the top 100 women in the Washington, D.C. area professionally for 2, 3, 4 years by organizations. So she became quite a presence in the area. She actually created what I call a revolution in this field. She became a national voice in sustainable agriculture, and she developed around 5 concentric circles. She started with producers. She then went out to get better eating habits established among residents of Washington, D.C. and surrounding areas. She then actually created, through the food markets, what I just call community squares, social squares, where people would come down Saturday morning, leisurely talk, walk, hear music, and the sense of bondedness in the Washington, D.C. areas where her markets existed created community. And then she built a regional industry, and finally, there she is. At the end of that biggest circle, she's starting to repair the land of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. She was an entrepreneur, a clear innovator. She led with public-private partnerships, which is a way to deal in organizational effectiveness today. She's a change agent. She had a revealing social conscience with everything. And I think if William & Mary is to celebrate 100 years of co-education in the near future, people like Ann Harvey Yonkers need to be considered closely for awards like this one.